with a little fall themed video. Cute little focus. Hey everyone, thank you guys for coming to my Monday night stream here on my YouTube channel. So I'd like to say hello first to you guys. Zach, Kendall, Juana, Jill, and Serena, Alyssa, Charlie, Agro, Jesse, Squig, Joanna, Peggy, Maxfield, Kren, Lee, Dakra, Squig, Blue Rose, Lizzie, Melissa, Gordon, Deborah, light some candles, light some candles. Put this one here for a nice little glow, and another candle. This one rolled over, as you can see. Good evening, everyone. Today we're going to be doing a story time of one of my favorite books, and also the book itself is quite beautiful. And also we'll be doing a little bit of The Hobbit as well, catching up and seeing where we're at. Good evening. Hey, Casa. Thank you, Casa. The hollow sound of this glass fascinates me because it doesn't feel solid the way I'm used to it. Perhaps it's because the outer lining isn't filled with wax, so it echoes when it bounces off the candle to the glass and back. Okay, put that up there. Can you guys hear me okay? yourself some time to turn in, and that's what fall is like for me. I'm very excited for the seasons to change, to be honest. It's just been so hot, so I'm not complaining, but I always love the change in seasons, so this is perfect. And by the words of F. Scott Fitzgerald, I wanted to read to you something I liked from his book, The Great Gatsby. Life starts all over again when it gets crisp in the fall. Crisp, crisp, crisp. That's what it feels like for me. Thank you, Casa. Thank you so much. So, hope you guys can just chill and relax. Maybe put on some headphones. I have a very wonderful special edition for you guys. This is, if you could guess, such an old book, that's for sure. We'll move the candle over here, away from the world. Let's just enjoy the lovely sound. It's the softest paperback binding, cloth cover. Hi, you guys. Thank you so much for joining today's stream. When I stream on VR for Twitch, I can't read your chats, unfortunately, so it's so nice to be able to read your chats today. So, today we're going to be reading The Great Gatsby by F. Scott T. Fitzgerald. I really like this edition because it shows Gatsby's life and where in history things were occurring. It's a nice little timeline of his life alongside important world events. Thank you so much, Gordon. Thank you. Here's wonderful events that happened. He was born in St. Paul, Minnesota. During that time, William McKinley was elected president. And let's see. Einstein's theory of relativity around 1905. At the same time, Jack London and Edith Wharton's books Call of the Wild and The House of Mirth were published. So it's just kind of nice. Look at this. 1924. He moves to live on the French Riviera. And around that time, talking pictures were developed. So it's just very interesting to see this. I have actually never watched the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio himself, but I aims to. Drink your water, drink your water, drink your water, drink your water, drink your water. Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Hi everybody. You guys are so funny. Hi Deborah. Thank you so much. Long time no see, you guys, and I hope you're all doing well. Missed you guys too. I got these fall leaf earrings, but we had to change out the hoop because it wasn't sterling silver or gold-plated sterling silver, and my ears are like sensitive if there's nickel in it or other metals that can cause an allergy reaction. So we changed out, and now we have a gold-plated sterling silver hoop. I've been revitalizing a lot of old items lately. That's part of my turning in for the past week. So, alright. The Great Gatsby was published in 1925. A quote. I've been looking at a lot of edge coating for leather and jackets and coats for fall. Oh, falling floor. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad you like the videos and streams. Thank you very much. So, I read that as coat. Coat's been on my mind today. But here is a quote by Thomas Park d'Invilliers. Correct me if I said that wrong. Then wear the gold hat, if that will move her. If you can bounce high, bounce for her too, till she cry, lover, gold-hatted, dancing lover. I must have you. Would you do that? We are doing chapter 1. Great Gatsby. Perfect for fall. The Great Gatsby. Chapter 1. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. He didn't say any more, but we've always been unusually communicative in a reserved way, and I understood that he meant a great deal more than that. In consequence, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments, a habit that has opened up many curious natures to me, and also made me the victim of not a few veteran bores. The abnormal mind is quick to detect and attach itself to this quality when it appears in a normal person, and so it came about that in college I was unjustly accused of being a politician because I was privy to the secret griefs of the world, of the wild, unknown men. Most of the confidences were unsoft, sought frequently. I have faint sleep, preoccupation, or a hostile levity when I realized by some unmistakable sign that an intimate revelation was quivering on the horizon. For the intimate revelations of young men, or at least the terms in which they express them, are usually plagiaristic and marred by obvious suppressions. Reserving judgments is a matter of infinite hope. I am still a little afraid of missing something if I forget that, as my father snobbishly suggested, and I snobbishly repeated, a sense of the fundamental decencies is parceled out unequally at birth. And after boasting this way of my tolerance, I come to the admission that it has a limit. Have you guys read this in school? I must have read this like in junior high and also like in college for fun, but yeah. And I just, if you remember, the beginning of this year, one of my very first videos, the intro was me reading The Great Gatsby in another paper book bound cover, and that was really nice because that was from one of those neighborhood libraries where you borrow books and give books for others to check out as long as they want or keep. And that's where I got it from. Now we have this amazing cloth-bound cloth cover to have as part of the collection. Hey, Michael. Conduct may be founded on the hard rock or the wet marshes, but after a certain point, I don't care what it's founded on. When I came back from the east last autumn, I felt that I wanted the world to be in uniform, and that a sort of moral attention forever. I wanted no more riotous excursions with privileged glimpses into the human heart. Only Gatsby, the man who gives his name to this book, was exempt from my reaction. Gatsby, who represented everything for which I have an unaffected scorn. If personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, then there was something gorgeous about him, some heightened sensitivity to the promises of life, as if he were related to one of those intricate machines that register earthquakes 10,000 miles away. This responsiveness had nothing to do with that flabby impressionability which is dignified under the name of the creative temperament. It was an extraordinary gift for hope, a romantic readiness such as I have never found in any other person, and which it is not likely I shall ever find again. No. Gatsby turned out all right at the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of streams, that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. Coming closer. Okay. You might want to turn your volume just a tad bit, so I'm a bit closer to the mic. Let me know. My family has been prominent, well-to-do people in the Middle Western city for 3 generations. The Caraways are something of a clan, and we have a tradition that we're descended from the Dukes of Buccleuch. But the actual founder of my line was my grandfather's brother, who came here in '51, sent a substitute to the Civil War, and started the wholesale hardware business that my father carries on today. Hi, Big Tex. I agree. I never saw this great uncle, but I'm supposed to look like him, with special references to the rather hard-boiled painting that hangs in Father's office. I graduated from New Haven in 1915, just a quarter of a century after my father, and a little later I participated in that delayed Teutonic migration known as the Great War. I enjoyed the counter-raid so thoroughly that I came back restless. Instead of being the warm center of the world, the Middle West now seemed like the ragged edge of the universe. So I decided to go east and learn the bond business. So I supposed it could support one more single man. Everybody I knew was in the bond business. All my aunts and uncles talked it over as if they were choosing a prep school for me, and finally said, "Why, yes," with very grave, hesitant faces. Father agreed to finance me for a year, and after various delays, I came east permanently, I thought, in the spring of 22. The practical thing was to find rooms in the city, but it was a warm season, and I just left a country of wide lawns and friendly trees. So when a young man at the office suggested that we take a house together in a commuting town, it sounded like a great idea. He found the house, a weather-beaten cardboard bungalow at $80 a month, but at the last minute the firm ordered him to Washington, and I went out to the country alone. I had a dog, at least I had him for a few days until he ran away, and an old Dodge, and a Finnish woman who made my bed and cooked breakfast and muttered Finnish wisdom to herself over the electric stove. It was lonely for a day or so until one morning some man, more recently arrived than I, stopped me on the road. "How do you get to West Egg Village?" he asked helplessly. I told him, and as I walked on, I was lonely no longer. I was a guide, a pathfinder, an original settler. He had casually conferred on me the freedom of the neighborhood. And so, with the sunshine and the great bursts of leaves growing on the trees, just as things grow in fast movies, I had that familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer. There was so much to read, for one thing, and so much fine health to be pulled down out of the young breath-giving air. Oh, that sounds nice. I bought a dozen volumes on banking and credit, and invested securities, and they stood on my shelf in red and gold like new money from the mint, promising to unfold the shining secrets that only Midas and Morgan and Maecenas knew. And I had the high intention of reading many other books besides. I was rather literary in college. One year I wrote an essay of very solemn and obvious editorials for the Yale News. And now I was going to bring back all such things into my life and become again that most limited of all specialists, the well-rounded man. I like that. I like being well-rounded. This isn't just an epigram. Life is much more successfully looked at from a single window, after all. It was a matter of chance that I should have rented a house in one of the strangest communities in North America. It was on that slender, riotous island which extends itself due east of New York, and where there are, among other natural curiosities, two unusual formations of land. 20 miles from the city, a pair of enormous eggs, identical to contour and separated only by the Courtesy Bay, jut out into the most domesticated body of salt water in the Western Hemisphere, the great wet barnyard of Long Island Sound. They are not perfect ovals, like the egg in the Columbus story. They are both crushed flat at the contact end, but their physical resemblance must be a source of perpetual wonder to the gulls that fly overhead. To the wingless, a more interesting phenomenon is their dissimilarity in every particular except shape and size. I lived in the West Egg, the less fashionable of the two, though this is the most superficial tag to express the bizarre and not a little sinister contrast between them. My house was at the very tip of the egg, only 50 yards from the Sound, and squeezed between two huge places that rented for $12,000 or $15,000 a season. It's like $4,000 a month back then. The one on my right was a colossal affair by any standard. It was a factual imitation of some Hotel de Ville in Normandy, with a tower on one side, spanking new under a thin beard of raw ivy, and a marble swimming pool more than 40 acres of lawn and garden. It was Gatsby's mansion. Or rather, as I didn't know Mr. Gatsby, it was a mansion inhabited by a gentleman of that name. My own house was an eyesore, but it was a small eyesore, and it had been overlooked, so I had a view of the water, a partial view of my neighbor's lawn, and the consoling proximity of millionaires, all for $80 a month. Hi, everybody. Gatsby. Across the Courtesy Bay, the white palaces of fashionable East Egg glittered along the water, and the history of the summer really begins on the evening I drove over there to have dinner with the Tom Buchanans. Daisy was my second cousin, once removed, and I'd known Tom in college. Just after the war, I spent 2 days with him in Chicago. Her husband, among various physical accomplishments, had been one of the most powerful ends that ever played football at New Haven. A national figure in a way. One of those two men who reached such an acute, limited excellence at 21 that everything afterwards savors of anticlimax. His family were enormously wealthy. Even in college, his freedom with money was a matter for reproach. But now he'd left Chicago and come east in a fashion that rather took your breath away. For instance, he'd brought down a string of polo ponies from Lake Forest. It was hard to realize that a man in my own generation was wealthy enough to do that. Why they came east, I don't know. They'd spent a year in France for no particular reason, and then drifted here and there unrestfully wherever people played polo and were rich together. This was a permanent move, said Daisy over the telephone, but I didn't believe it. I had no sight into Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom would drift on forever, seeking a little wistfully for the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game. And so it happened that on a warm, windy evening, I drove over to East Egg to see two old friends whom I scarcely knew at all. Their house was even more elaborate than I expected. A cheerful, red and white Georgian colonial mansion overlooking the bay. The lawn started at the beach and ran towards the front door for a quarter of a mile, jumping over sundials and brick walks and burning gardens. And finally, when it reached the house, drifting up the side in bright vines as though from the momentum of its run. Thank you, Casino. Welcome, everyone that's here. Thank you for stopping by. The front was broken by a line of French windows, glowing now with reflected gold and wide open to the warm, windy afternoon. And Tom Buchanan in riding clothes was standing with his legs apart on the front porch. Did I say morning, you guys? Good evening. He had changed since his New Haven years. Now he was a sturdy, straw-haired man of 30 with a rather hard mouth and a supercilious manner. Two shining, arrogant eyes had established dominance over his face and gave him the appearance of always leaning aggressively forward. Not even the effeminate swaying of his riding clothes could hide the enormous power of that body. He seemed to feel those glistening boots until he strained the top lacing, and you could see a great pack of muscle shifting when his shoulders moved under his thin coat. It was a body capable of enormous leverage. A cruel body. His speaking voice, a gruff, husky tenor, added to the impression of fractiousness he conveyed. There was a touch of paternal contempt in it, even towards people he liked, and there were men at New Haven who had hated his guts. Now, don't think my opinion on these matters is final, he seemed to say, just because I'm stronger and more of a man than you are. We were in the same senior society, and while we were never intimate, I always had the impression that he had approved of me and wanted me to like him with some harsh, defiant wistfulness of his own. We talked for a few minutes on the sunny porch. I got a nice place here, he said, his eyes flashing about restlessly. Turning me around by one arm, he moved a broad, flat hand along the front face, including in its sweep a sunken Italian garden, a half-acre of deep, pungent roses, and a snub-nosed motorboat that bumped the tide offshore. It belonged to the Maine, the old man, he told me. He turned me around again, and politely and abruptly, "We'll go inside." We walked through a high hallway into a bright rose-colored space, fragilely bound into the house by French windows at either end. The windows were ajar and gleaming white against the fresh grass outside that seemed to grow a little way into the house. The breeze blew through the room, blue curtains in at one end and out the other like pale flags, twisting them up towards the frosted wedding cake of the ceiling, and then rippled over the wine-colored rug, making a shadow on it as wind does on the sea. The only completely stationary object in the room was an enormous couch on which two young women were buoyed up as though upon an anchored balloon. They were both in white, and their dresses were rippling and fluttering, as if they had just been blown back in after a short flight around the house. I must have stood for a few moments, listening to the whip and snap of the curtains and the groan of the picture on the wall. Then there was a boom as Tom Buchanan shut the rear windows, and caught wind died out about the room. And the curtains and the rugs and the two young women ballooned slowly to the floor. The younger of the two was a stranger to me. She was extended, full length, at her end of the divan, completely motionless, and with her chin raised a little, as if she were balancing something on it which was quite likely to fall. If she saw me out of the corner of her eyes, she gave no hint of it. Indeed, I was almost surprised into murmuring an apology for having disturbed her by coming in. Hi, you guys. The other girl, Daisy, made an attempt to rise. She leaned slightly forward with a conscientious expression, and then laughed an absurd, charming little laugh. And I laughed too, and came forward into the room. I'm paralyzed with happiness, she laughed again, as if she said something very witty, and held my hand for a moment, looking up into my face, promising that there was no one in the world she so much wanted to see. That was a way she had. She hinted in a murmur that the surname of the balancing girl was Baker. That's Baker. I've heard it said that Daisy's murmur was only to make people lean towards her, an irrelevant criticism that made it no less charming. At any rate, Miss Baker's lips fluttered. She nodded at me, almost imperceptibly, and then quickly tipped back her head again. The object she was balancing had obviously tottered a little and given her something of a fright. Again, a sort of apology arose to my lips. Almost any exhibition of complete self-sufficiency draws a stunned tribute from me. I looked back at my cousin, who began to ask me questions in her low, thrilling voice. It was a kind of voice that the ear follows up and down, as if each speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again. Her face was sad and lovely, with bright things in it, bright eyes, and a bright, passionate mouth. But there was an excitement in her voice that men who had cared for her found difficult to forget. A singing compulsion, a whispered, "Listen," a promise that she had done gay, exciting things just while, and that there were gay, exciting things hovering in the next hour. I told her how I had stopped off in Chicago for a day on my way east, and how a dozen people had sent their love through me. "Do they miss me?" she cried ecstatically. "The whole town is desolate. All the cars have the left rear wheel painted black as a mourning wreath, and there's a persistent wail all night along the North Shore. How gorgeous! Let's go back, Tom, tomorrow." Then she added, irrelevantly, "You ought to see the baby." "I'd like to. She's asleep. She's 3 years old. Haven't you ever seen her?" "Never." "Well, you ought to see her. She's—" Tom Buchanan, who had been hovering restlessly about the room, stopped and rested his hand on my shoulder. "What you doing, Nick?" "I'm a bondman." "Who with?" I told him. "Never heard of them," he remarked decisively. This kind of annoyed me. "You will," I answered shortly.
You will if you stay in the East." "Oh, I'll stay in the East, don't you worry," he said, glancing at Daisy and then back at me, as if he were alert for something more. "I'd be a goddamn fool to live anywhere else." At this point, Miss Baker said, "Absolutely," with such suddenness that I started. It was the first word she had uttered since I came into the room. Evidently, it surprised her as much as it did me, for she yawned and with a series of rapid, deft movements stood up into the room. "I'm stiff," she complained. "I've been lying on that sofa for as long as I can remember." "Don't look at me," Daisy retorted. "I've been trying to get you to New York all afternoon." "No thanks," said Miss Baker to the 4 cocktails just in front of the pantry. "I'm absolutely in training." Her host looked at her incredulously. "You are." He took down his drink as if it were a drop in the bottom of a glass. "How you ever get anything done is beyond me." I looked at Miss Baker, wondering what it was she got done. I enjoyed looking at her. She was a slender, small-breasted girl with an erect carriage, which she accentuated by throwing her body backwards at the shoulders like a young cadet. Her gray, sun-strained eyes looked back at me with polite, reciprocal curiosity out of a wan, charming, discontented face. It occurred to me now that I had seen her, or a picture of her, somewhere before. "You live in West Egg," she remarked contemptuously. "I know somebody there." "I don't know a single—" "You must be Gatsby." "Gatsby?" demanded Daisy. "What Gatsby?" Before I could reply that he was my neighbor, dinner was announced. Wedging his tense arm imperatively under mine, Tom Buchanan compelled me from the room as though he were moving a checker to another square. Slenderly, languidly, their hands set lightly on their hips, the 2 young women preceded us out into the rosy-colored porch, open towards the sunset, where 4 candles flickered on the table in the diminished wind. "Why candles?" objected Daisy, frowning. She snapped them out with her fingers. "In 2 weeks, it'll be the longest day in the year." She looked at us, all radiantly. "Do you always watch for the longest day of the year and then miss it?" "I always watch for the longest day in the year and then miss it." "We ought to plan something," yawned Miss Baker, sitting down at the table as if she were getting into bed. "All right," said Miss Daisy. "What'll we plan?" She turned to me helplessly. "What do people plan?" Before I could answer, her eyes fastened with an odd expression on her little finger. "Look," she complained, "I hurt it." We all looked. The knuckle was black and blue. "You did it, Tom," she said accusingly. "I know you didn't mean to, but you did do it. That's what I get for marrying a brute of a man. A great, big, hulking, physical specimen of a—" "I hate that word, hulking," objected Tom crossly, "even in kidding." "Hulking," insisted Daisy. "Hulking, hulking, hulking." Sometimes she and Miss Baker talked at once, unobtrusively, and with a bantering inconsequence that was never quite a chatter. That was as cool as their white dresses and their impersonal eyes in the absence of all desire. They were here, and they accepted Tom and me, making only a polite, pleasant effort to entertain or to be entertained. They knew that presently dinner would be over, and a little later that evening too would be over and casually put away. It was sharply different from the West, for an evening was hurried from face to face towards its close, in a continually disappointed anticipation, or else in sheer nervousness, dread of the moment itself. You make me feel uncivilized, Daisy. I confessed on my second glass of corky but rather impressive claret. "Can't you talk about crops or something?" I meant nothing in particular by this remark, but it was taken up in an unexpected way. "Civilization's going to pieces," broke out Tom violently. I've gotten a terrible pessimist about things. Have you read The Rise of the Colored Empires by this man Godard? Why, no, I answered, rather surprised by his tone. Well, it's a fine book, and everybody ought to read it. The idea is, if we don't look out, the white race will be utterly submerged. It's all scientific stuff. It's been proved. Tom's getting very profound, said Daisy, with an expression of unthoughtful sadness. He reads deep books with long words in them. What was that word Well, these books are all scientific, insisted Tom, glancing at her impatiently. This fellow has worked out the whole thing. It's up to us, who are the dominant race, to watch out, or these other races will have control of things. We've got to beat them down, whispered Daisy, winking ferociously towards the fervent sun. You ought to live in California. Oh, you ought to live in California, began Miss Baker, but Tom interrupted by her shifting heavily in his chair. This idea is that we're Nordics. I am, and you are, and you are. After an infinitesimal hesitation, he included Daisy with a slight nod, and she winked at me again. And we produce all these things that go to make civilization. Oh, science and art and all that. Do you see? There was something pathetic in his concentration, as if his complacency, more acute than of old, was not enough to him anymore. When almost immediately the telephone rang inside, and the butler left the porch, Daisy seized upon the momentary interruption and leaned towards me. I'll tell you a family secret, she whispered enthusiastically. It's about the butler's nose. Do you want to hear about the butler's nose? That's why I came over tonight. Well, he wasn't always a butler. He used to be the silver polisher for some people in New York that had a silver service for 200 people. He had to polish it from morning till night, until finally it began to affect his nose. Things went from bad to worse, suggested Miss Baker. Yes, things went from bad to worse, until finally he had to give up his position. For a moment the last sunshine fell with romantic affection upon her glowing face. Her voice compelled me forward breathlessly as I listened. Then the glow faded, each light deserting her with lingering regret, like children leaving a pleasant street at dusk. The butler came back and murmured something close to Tom's ear, whereupon Tom frowned, pushed back his chair, and without a word went inside. As if his absence quickened something within her, Daisy leaned forward again, her voice glowing and singing. I'd love to see you at my table, Nick. You remind me of a rose. An absolute rose. Doesn't he? She turned to Miss Baker for a confirmation. An absolute rose. This was untrue. I am not even faintly like a rose. She was only extemporizing, but a stirring warmth flowed from her, as if her heart was trying to come out at you, concealed in one of those breathless, thrilling words. Then suddenly, she threw her napkin on the table and excused herself and went into the house. Miss Baker and I exchanged a short glance, consciously devoid of meaning. I was about to speak when she sat up alertly and said, "Shh," in a warning voice. A subdued, impassioned murmur was audible in the room beyond, and Miss Baker leaned forward, unashamed, trying to hear. The murmur trembled on the verge of coherence, sank down, mounted excitedly, and then ceased altogether. This Mr. Gatsby you spoke of is my neighbor, I began. Don't talk. I want to hear what happens. Is something happening? I inquired innocently. You mean you don't know? Said Miss Baker, honestly surprised. I thought everybody knew. I don't. Why, she said hesitantly, Tom's got some woman in New York. Got some woman? I repeated blankly. Gordon, thank you. Thank you, Gordon. Miss Baker nodded. She might have the decency not to telephone him at dinner time, don't you think? Almost before I had grasped her meaning, there was a flutter of a dress and the crunch of leather boots, and Tom and Daisy were back at the table. It couldn't be helped, cried Daisy with tense gaiety. She sat down, glanced searchingly at Miss Baker, and then at me, and continued. I looked outdoors for a minute, and it's very romantic outdoors. There's a bird on the lawn that I think must be Nightingale. Come over on the Cunard or White Star Line. He's singing away. Her voice sang. It's romantic, isn't it, Tom? Very romantic, he said, and then miserably to me. If it's light enough after dinner, I want to take you down to the stables. The telephone rang inside startlingly, and as Daisy shook her head decisively at Tom, the subject of the stables, in fact all subjects, vanished into thin air. Among the broken fragments of the last 5 minutes at table, I remember the candles being lit again, pointlessly, and I was conscious of wanting to look squarely at everyone, and yet to avoid all eyes. I couldn't guess what Daisy and Tom were thinking, but I doubt if even Miss Baker, who seemed to have mastered a certain hearty skepticism, was able, utterly, to put this fifth guest's shrill metallic urgency out of mind. To a certain temperament, the situation might have seemed intriguing. My own instinct was to telephone immediately for the police. The horses, needless to say, were not mentioned again. Tom and Miss Baker, with several feet of twilight between them, strolled back into the library, as if to a vigil, besides a perfectly tangible body, while trying to look pleasantly interested in the little death. I followed Daisy around in a chain of connecting verandas to the porch in front. In its deep gloom, we sat down by the side on a wicker settee. Daisy looked at her face in her hands as if its lovely shape and her eyes moved gradually out into the velvet dusk. I saw that turbulent emotions possessed her, so I asked what I thought would be some sedative questions about her little girl. We don't know each other very well, Nick, she said suddenly. Even if we are cousins, you didn't come to my wedding. I wasn't back from the war. That's true, she hesitated. Well, I've had a very bad time, Nick, and I'm pretty cynical about everything. Evidently, she had reason to be. I waited, but she didn't say any more. And after a moment, I returned rather feebly to the subject of her daughter. I suppose she talks, and she eats, and everything. Oh, yes, she looked at me absently. Listen, Nick, let me tell you what I said when she was born. Would you like to hear? Very much. It'll show you how I've gone to feel about things. Well, she was less than an hour old, and Tom was God knows where. I woke up out of the ether with an utterly abandoned feeling, and I asked the nurse right away if it was a boy or a girl. She told me it was a girl. And so I turned my head away and wept. All right, I said. I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world. A beautiful little fool. You see, I think everything's terrible anyhow, she went on in a convinced way. Everybody thinks so. The most advanced people. And I know. I've been everywhere and seen everything and done everything. Her eyes flashed around her in a defiant way, rather like Tom's, and she laughed with thrilling scorn. Sophisticated. God, I'm sophisticated. The instant her voice broke off, ceasing to compel my attention, my belief, I felt the basic insincerity of what she had said. It made me uneasy, as though the whole evening had been a trick of some sort to exact a contributory emotion from me. I waited, and sure enough, in a moment, she looked at me with an absolute smirk on her lovely face, as if she had asserted her membership in a rather distinguished secret society, to which she and Tom belonged. Inside, the crimson room bloomed with light. Tom and Miss Baker sat at either end of the long couch, and she read aloud to him from the Saturday Evening Post, the words, murmurous and uninflected, running together in a soothing tune. The lamplight brought on his boots, and dull on the autumn leaf yellow of her hair glinted along the paper as she turned the page with a flutter of slender muscles in her arms. When we came in, she held us silent for a moment with a lifted hand. "To be continued," she said, tossing the magazine on the table. "In our very next issue." Her body asserted itself with a restless movement of her knee, and she stood up. 10 o'clock, she remarked, apparently finding the time on the ceiling. "Time for this good girl to go to bed." "Jordan's going to play in the tournament tomorrow," explained Daisy, "over at Westchester." "Oh, you're Jordan Baker." I knew now why her face was familiar. Its pleasing, contemptuous expression had looked out at me from many rotogravure pictures of the sporting life at Asheville and Hot Springs and Palm Beach. I'd heard some story of her too. A critical, unpleasant story. What it was, I had forgotten long ago. It's a little alien inside me. "Good night," she said softly. "Wake me up at 8, won't you?" "If you'll get up." "I will. Good night, Mr. Carraway. See you at home." "Of course you will," confirmed Daisy. "In fact, I think I'll arrange a marriage. Come over often, Nick, and I'll sort of, fling you together. You know, lock you up accidentally in linen closets and push you out to sea and boat and all that sort of thing." "Good night," called Miss Baker from the stairs. "I haven't heard a word." "She's a nice girl," said Tom after a moment. "They ought to let her run around the country this way." "Who oughtn't to?" inquired Daisy coldly. "Her family." "Her family is one aunt about 1,000 years old. Besides, Nick's going to look after her. Aren't you, Nick? She's going to spend lots of weekends out here in the summer. I think the home influence will be very good for her." Daisy and Tom looked at each other for a moment in silence. "Is she from New York?" I asked quickly. "From Louisville." Our white girlhood was passed together there. Our beautiful white... "Did you give Nick a little heart-to-heart talk on the veranda?" demanded Tom suddenly. "Did I?" She looked at me. "I can't seem to remember, but I think we talked about the Nordic race. Yes, I'm sure we did. It sort of crept up on us, and first thing you know..." "Don't believe everything you hear, Nick," he advised me. I said lightly that I had heard nothing at all, and a few minutes later I got up to go home. They came to the door with me and stood side by side in a cheerful square of light. As I started my motor, Daisy peremptorily called, "Wait, I forgot to ask you something, and it's important. We heard you were engaged to a girl out west." "That's right," Tom corroborated kindly. "We heard that you were engaged." "It's a libel. I'm too poor." "But we heard it," insisted Daisy, surprising me by opening up again in a flower-like way. "We heard it from 3 people, so it must be true." Of course I knew what they were referring to, but I wasn't even vaguely engaged. The fact that gossip has published bans was one of the reasons I'd come east. You can't stop going with an old friend on account of rumors, and on the other hand, I'd no intention of being rumored into marriage. Their interest rather touched me. It made them less remotely rich, nevertheless. I was confused and a little disgusted as I drove away. It seemed to me that the thing for Daisy to do was to rush out of the house, child in her arms, but apparently there was no such intentions in her head. As for Tom, the fact that he had some woman in New York was really less surprising than that he had been depressed by a book. Something was making him nibble at the edge of the stale ideas, as if his sturdy physical egotism no longer nourished his peremptory heart. Oof, 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 oof. Already, it was deep summer on roadhouse roofs and in front of wayside garages, new red gas pumps sat out in pools of light, and when I reached my estate at Westlake, I ran the car under its shed and sat for a while on an abandoned grass roller in the yard. The wind had blown off, leaving a sudden, loud, bright night, with wings beating in the trees and a persistent organ sound as the full bellows of the earth blew the frogs full of life. The silhouette of a moving cat wavered across the moonlight, and turning my head to watch it, I saw that I was not alone. 50 feet away, a figure had emerged from the shadow of my neighbor's mansion, and was standing with his hand in his pockets, regarding the silver peppers of the stars. Something in his leisurely movements and the secure position of his feet upon the lawn suggested that it was Mr. Gatsby himself. He had come out to determine what share of his was our local havens. I decided to call him. Miss Baker had mentioned him at dinner, and that would do for an introduction. But I didn't call to him, for I gave a sudden intimation that he was content to be alone. He stretched out his arms toward the dark water in a curious way, and as far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Involuntarily, I glanced seaward and distinguished nothing except a single green light, minute and far away. That might have been the end of a dock. When I looked once more for Gatsby, he had vanished, and I was alone again in the unquiet darkness. Wow, that was one chapter, you guys. 15 pages. So we had our little introduction of Mr. Nick Carraway, Tom Buchanan, Daisy Buchanan, Jordy Baker, and Great Gatsby himself lurking in the shadows. Yay! Now remember, I should always drink water. Always have water with you. That's something that I highly strongly recommend. Hey Marcus. Hey Lee. Gordon. So what have you guys been up to? What did you guys do today? Did you have a very good weekend? Hi, big text. You don't have to do that. Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Hydrate, 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 hydrate. Hi. I'll tell you what I've been doing. I've been learning a little something lately. Leather crafting, if you will. And I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos. Thank God for YouTube videos. Learning how to use certain tools to do what you need for leather work. And I'm so glad that I did this. It was very tingly inducing for me last night. I got all my tools together, and I decided that I wanted to adjust the length of my bags. A lot of bags these days are made for, I want to say, models that are 5'10", 5'11", 6 feet higher, taller maybe. And so the bags are always extremely long for my body. And so I punched holes out of them to shorten the straps. And I've punched as much as I could. I took it to a store, and they said they would punch it for me, but they recommended to actually adjust it properly. So I punched as much
holes as I could. I believe I added 3 holes to this one. But I decided to do it properly. So what you do is you take the edge of the strap and you reopen it up and you take off as much as you need, and then you do the same thing that occurs here at the edge. So as you can see, this part is actually 2 pieces of leather, thinned, folded over, thinned and blended, so it looks very seamlessly attached this way, and of course restitched and glued and all of that. So a little time to myself last night, and I successfully treated 3 bags, and I'm on my way to the 4th bag, which I will be doing tomorrow. I was very, very pleased with myself, so this is how much I took off my smallest, cutest little bag. This is about 10 inches. So I took off the chain here, obviously. And then I was very pleased with that I decided to do another bag. This was my Prada bag, which was always too long for me, so I never really wore it. But I figured I need to do this properly so I can properly wear a good bag. So I did it actually a lot better than they did, because look at this, like the threading is exposed and it's not even skived, the leather doesn't blend into this part. So I did it much nicer. I folded it over a little bit more, thinned out the leather some more, and made sure none of the threadings were exposed or sticking out this way. They didn't seal off the edges very well. And then I decided to do the pink bag last night, so I didn't sleep till like 2 o'clock. And then this morning I decided to do this bag. So this is the one that needs, this is fine that this is coming off. I'm going to restitch it. I need the yellow thread anyway. So I took out about, I think this was 10 inches as well. See how it's thinned out like that? You have a nice skiving tool, and you shave. I don't have a skiving machine, so it's not professional looking, but it works just for me. And then I'm going to seal it over, put the metal piece back in. I have my little dive. It's a clamp. It holds the leather together. And I'm going to be restitching it myself, gluing, adding some edge coat, and applying lots of leather conditioner. So, I know you can always go and get these done, but I felt like this is something I might want to learn how to do myself. So I've been learning new things lately, and this was one of them. And it brings me great satisfaction to know that I can do little things by myself. If only I was like a bigger, stronger person, I would definitely love to work on cars. I can change my own oil, all that. Put air, change tires, but it's not really an interest of mine anyway. And then also, these came in today. I'm so excited. I have all these really old pea coats and just old winter jackets, and it's gonna be cold here now, so I decided to spruce them up. So I have these really beautiful gold buttons, and I'm so excited to change all the buttons on my coats. I have 2 different sizes. I'm not really good at sewing myself. I've owned a sewing machine, but that is something that I would love to get better at, because I'm a small person and
all of the jacket arm sleeves are always too long for me, so I always have to roll them up. But why buy new clothes when you should be altering the ones you have to fit you? Perfectly fitted clothes anyway is much better than having a sea of clothing that you'll never wear. So I'll probably be learning to do that, sewing, things like that. Oh, another thing, you guys. I've been learning this VR headset. It's not much to learn. Well, it kind of is. It's so much fun to stream. I've been playing scary games with some people from YouTube, Patreon, Twitch supporters. And it's just so interesting because when you don't have the VR in your play area, it doesn't load properly. So I had to make sure that was there all set up, and then have the Oculus set up and the Steam set up, and then upload or stream, and there's just like so many technical things, so that was a lot of fun. But I think my favorite part is meeting a lot of really cool personalities online. Obviously I'll never meet you, but getting to know you online when we play games together has been a lot of fun, so I definitely appreciate that. We've been playing Phasmophobia, having lots of fun with that. But I'm gonna do one last scary stream this Sunday. For Halloween. And yeah. Let's see, what else? There's just a ton of stuff around me. Crafting tools. I'm gonna have, like, when I have my own place, I'm gonna have one room dedicated to just crafts. Like, my rooms would be just like tables and tables and tables and tables like all around for like different things. So one side would be like my jewelry table, one side will be like crafts, cloths, making things, you know, just like a room of, oh, and then a painting section, like that, and then yeah, another room just for filming, because filming stuff takes up, there's just so much. I don't have room for all this stuff. I don't have a studio, so it would be nice to have an actual studio that's separate from my room. There's just too much stuff everywhere. And another room for like wellness and things, like exercising, because we can't go to the gym anymore, so yes. And I'm also learning some more makeup things. So I just got this and I'm so excited about it. It's a color corrector. You guys know how much I like color correctors, so one thing I'm doing is I'm learning how to put makeup on very, very lightly, but still with a very decent coverage. So by putting on a color corrector on your face. Oh, thank you, JP. Thank you. You don't have to put on as much foundation or concealer to cover your blemishes and things. It's just another like artsy thing. My desk here is filled with art supplies. I have so many canvases and acrylic paints and brushes and things next to me. But I really like this because it looks very artsy. Hi, David. And it's so funny because I do like the no makeup look. So I feel like my makeup has been like really boring lately because I don't really do anything. But so this has different colors. And this has a little flap that covers all of your creams, which I appreciate because I didn't know it had this. It's a cute little glass flap to protect the creams so they don't dry out.
think that's really nice. So you have greens to cover up any rednesses. So you'd normally put the greens like cheeks or like around the nose, things. Same thing for yellows. Yellows are good for greens. And then you have like dark salmon colors and orange colors to cover up any under eye darkness, because that's the opposite on the color wheel. So a little bit of that, and then a little bit of concealer over it. Lots of tapping, 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 tapping will make for a better neutralizing coverage. And then you have this purple one. I just used a little bit of this palette literally right before we streamed. So I'm very excited to try this. And yeah. Lavender is my favorite color, so I think the lavender here would be good. It's very light, like a light purple. I think the lighter the better. You see that? Light purple is my favorite. There was this bag online that I should have gotten from eBay. It was a collector's item, and it was my favorite lilac color, and I didn't get it, and I still think about it to this day. I saw it like 4 years ago. Let's see if we have any other lavender colors. Yes. Let's see. And just have this random stuff on my table. I have this picture of my mom. I took this when we went to, if you guys have ever been in the Bay Area, this is a little bit south to the coast, Carmel by the sea. There's this beautiful 17-mile drive that we went on, and like every stop was just a view of beautiful beaches, lovely homes. I took this there this was like 7 years ago, I think, but I keep it with me. It's usually in my dresser, but I moved dressers, so I have a tinier dresser now, if you can see. So I had to take out the cute little drawers I had out of it. Sorry if my room's a mess. There it is. There's my painting on top. And then I have this picture of one of my best friends who got married about 3 years ago. Don't know if you can see us, but see if you can find me in here. Where am I? There I am. I'm a dork. This is good times. Oh, thank you, Blakey. Blakey, how are you? Are you Blakey? Oh, how are you? And then I also have this. She's gonna kill me if she knows I showed you this. Oh, Blakey. Nice to meet you. Thank you. I spray painted on accident, but when we went to Portland, we literally were there to just eat. We just ate. Our itinerary was packed with food. Breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, dessert, every day. We just ate everything. So it says, keep calm and eat Portland, because we love Portland. And, let's see. Anything goes. So I'm talking a lot. also like cleaning out under your eyes when you take off your makeup. I hardly use them, so I've been using them quite liberally now when I do my crafting. I try to use these for ear cleaning. These are too tiny for ear cleaning. No. These are not good for ear cleaning. Well, we can try for you. But it never works really well under my ears. Yes, this works for under eye. Not inside your eye, but under your eye. And, oh my gosh, you guys, we have China Unique in the chat. Hi, China. How are you? Oh, it's always so nice seeing you. Thank you for stopping by. If you guys don't know China Unique, you definitely should check out her channel. She's given me the most ASMR lately, so I've been definitely watching you a lot in this quarantine. I've mentioned you a few times in a few previous chats, among many others that are my current and all-time favorites lately. Prada Bag. How was that? Oh, let me check one thing. Okay, we should be fine now. It's so interesting because I have the Wi-Fi connection literally right there. But if I'm plugged into the Wi-Fi, plugged to my computer, it lags. But it's just like literally an inch away from each other. So the computer or the internet has to be directly plugged into the computer, no matter what. Oh, Ashley. I'm glad. Have you guys ever found a really good, breakup? ASMR video? Breakup recovery? Breakup consolation? Helping you with a breakup? ASMR video? You like this? Sorry about that. Oh. My favorite girl trio show has been removed from Netflix, unfortunately. It was the Charmed show. I've never watched the Golden Girls. This is gonna sound lame, but I didn't have cable at the time, so a lot of those shows that people love, that you could only find on cable, I don't know any of them. And there were people always talking about like, oh, have you seen this movie? Have you seen that movie? And I'm always like, no, 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 no. But I'm getting more cultured. I'm getting more exposed to classics and things. So it's always so nice. They took off Charmed November 1st. And only, I always thought like, or October 1st, they should take it off after Halloween. Like, why did they take it off October 1st? But, old pro wrestling. Could you guys tell me if the Discord link is working? If not, I will give you guys a new link. I think I had to change it recently, so let's find. I have to change it for everybody. Wait, let's see. Hopefully I don't have to. Every time I log on to my everything I like them on my Patreon, it always asks for verification. So let's see. Can't do it right now. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to answer a call and it's not gonna work. Every time I log on, it always asks me to verify every single time, and it's on a computer that I use, and I save the password. It's okay. Oh, Deborah. Yes, yeah, I've had that picture for a while. I absolutely love this photo. Hello, Melina. Does it work? Hold on, let's see what we have here. I'm not sure if Nightbot can do Discord invites over here. Probably not. Alright. Let's see, commands. It's not on here. This is my favorite sound as of late. Thank you, Seabrook. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you, broken toilet seat. So I'm very excited to work on this today. In the mornings I just make my own thermos for hot tea, Earl Grey, or just regular tea without any non-dairy milk products. And then I put on a jacket and go for a nice little walk. It's kind of sad because where I live we don't have much of the fancy fall trees, so when I go looking for them it's just like, oh, it just feels like another summer. It's just colder. It's very, very few times that I'm seeing the beautiful changes in the colors of the leaves. But that's alright. Okay. So, let's see where we were at. Fall cactus. Sorry, my face is so close to the camera. I'll be honest with you that I used this webcam today because I was really lazy to do my makeup. So I just put on a lipstick and a little bit of concealer. And it's a lot more, it takes up so much space to use the DSLR for streaming, and my desk has so much stuff. If I could just show you how much stuff I have here. Just stuff everywhere. And so I have this webcam, and also it's nice because it has a wider angle look, whereas the other one is more zoomed into my face. So the quality's a little different, but I hope that is okay with you. I love this bookmark. One of my friends, he doesn't know this, the one that moved to Hong Kong, I'm probably not going to say it because he's probably watching. If he's watching, haha, I read your thing. But he left so many goodies, so he left 2 of these cute bookmarks that I've been using, and some guitar picks, and a journal, and what else did he leave behind? Some gloves, some North Face gloves. Didn't even use it, and you can use your phone with it. It's winter gloves. So, I don't need that here, so I gave that away. But yeah, I think of him every time because it's so cute. Look how cute. Look at butterflies in different colors. Look at that. So beautiful. The best bookmark ever. It makes nice sounds too. Okay. Alright, let's see where we were in this book. Let's see. Ooh, it's only 3 pages, so that's good. We will just kind of catch up. So, the burglar, Bilbo, was sent to investigate a fire in the forest in the middle of the night. When he arrived, he saw 3 gigantic, non-human humanoids, big ones, and then they had ruled everything out and decided that they were trolls. So
So they found him, and now he's conversing with them, all the while trying to convince them that he is not good for eating. So let's see what happens. Page 38. Bilbo found the internet trolls. That would have been the time for Bilbo to have left. But his poor little feet had been very squashed in Bert's big paw, and he had no breath in his body. And his head was going round, so there he lay for a while panting, just outside the circle of firelight. Right in the middle of the fight came up Balin. The dwarves had heard noises from a distance, and after waiting for some time for Bilbo to come back, or to hoot like an owl, they started off one by one to creep towards the light as quietly as they could. No sooner did Tom see Balin come into the light than he gave an awful howl. Trolls simply detest the very sight of dwarves, uncooked. Bert and Bill stopped fighting immediately, and, "A sack, Tom, quick," they said. Before Balin, who was wondering where in all this commotion Bilbo was, knew what was happening. A sack was over his head, and he was down. "There's more to come yet," said Tom, "or I might have mistook. Lots and none at all it is," he said. "No burra hobbits, but lots of these here dwarves. That's about the shape of it." "I reckon you're right," said Bert, "and we'd best get out of the light." And so they did. With sacks in their hands that they used for carrying off mutton and other plunder, they waited in the shadows as each dwarves came up and looked at the fire, and the spilled jugs and the gnawed mutton. In surprise, pop went a nasty, smelly sack over his head, and he was down. Soon Dwalin lay by Balin, and Philly and Killy together, and Nori and Dory and Ori, all in a heap, and Oin and Gloin and Biffer and Buffer and Bumber, piled uncomfortably near the fire. "That'll teach 'em," said Tom, for Biffer and Buffer had given a lot of trouble, and fought like mad, as dwarves will when cornered. Thorin came last, and he was not caught unawares. He came expecting mischief, and didn't need to see his friend's legs sticking out of sacks to tell him that things were not all well. He stood outside in the shadows some way off and said, "What's all this trouble? Who has been knocking my people about?" "It's trolls," said Bilbo from behind a tree. They had forgotten all about him. "They're hiding in the bushes with sacks," said he. "Oh, are they?" said Thorin, and he jumped forward to the fire before they could leap on him. He caught up a big branch on fire at one end, and Bert got that end in his eye before he could step aside. That put him out of the battle for a bit. Bilbo did his best. He got hold of Tom's leg as well as he could. It was thick as a young tree trunk, but he was sent spinning up into the top of some bushes, where Tom kicked the sparks up in Thorin's face. Tom got the branch in his feet for that, and lost one of the front ones. It made him howl, I can tell you. But just at that moment, William came up behind and popped a sack right over Thorin's head and down to his toes. And so the fight ended. A nice pickle they were all in now, and neatly tied up in sacks, with 3 angry trolls and 2 with burns and bashes to remember, sitting by them, arguing whether they should roast them slowly, or mince them fine and boil them, or just sit on them one by one and squash them into jelly. And Bilbo up in a bush with his clothes and his skin torn, not daring to move for fear they should hear him. It was just then that Gandalf came back. but no one saw him. The trolls had just decided to roast the dwarves now and eat them later. That was Bert's idea. And after a lot of arguments, they had all agreed to it. "No good roasting him now, it'd take all night," said a voice. Bert thought it was William's. "Don't start the argument all over again, Bill," he said, "or it will take all night." "Who's arguing?" said William, who thought it was Bert that had spoken. You are, said Bert. "You're a liar," said William. And so the argument began all over again. In the end, they decided to mince them fine and boil them. So they got a great black pot, and they took out their knives. "No good boiling 'em. We ain't got no water, and it's a long way to the well and all," said a voice. Bert and William thought it was Tom's. "Shut up," they said, "or we'll never have done, and you can fetch the water yourself if you say any more." "Shut up yourself," said Tom, who thought it was William's voice. "Who's arguing with but you, I'd like to know." "You're a booby," said William. "Booby yourself," said Tom. And so the argument began all over again, and went on hotter than ever, until at last they decided to sit on the sacks one by one and squash them and boil them until next time. "Who shall we sit on first?" said the voice. "Better sit on the last fellow first," said Bert, whose eye had been damaged by Thorin. He thought Tom was talking. "Don't talk to yourself," said Tom. "But if he wants to sit on the last one, sit on him. Which is he?" "The one with the yellow stockings," said Bert. "Nonsense, the one with the grey stockings," said a voice like William's. "I made sure it was yellow," said Bert. "Yellow it was," said William. "Then what did you say it was grey before?" said Bert. "I never did," said Tom. "That I never did," said Tom. "It was you." 2-1, so shut your mouth," said Bert. "Who are you talking to?" said William. "Now stop it," said Tom and Bert together. "The night's getting on and dawn comes early. Let's get on with it." "Dawn take you all and be stoned to you," said a voice that sounded like William's. But it wasn't, for just at that moment the light came over the hill, and there was a mighty twitter in the branches. William never spoke, for he stood turned to stone as he stooped, and Bert and Tom were stuck like rocks as they looked at him. And there they stand to this day, all alone, unless the birds perch on them, for trolls, as you probably know, must be underground before dawn, or they go back to the stuff of the mountains they are made of, and never move again. That is what happened to Bert and Tom and William. "Excellent," said Gandalf, as he stepped from behind a tree and helped Bilbo to climb down out of a thorn bush. Then Bilbo understood. It was the wizard's voice that had kept the trolls bickering and quarreling until the light came and made an end of them. The next thing was to untie the sacks and let out the dwarves. They were nearly suffocated and very annoyed. They had not at all enjoyed lying there listening to the trolls making plans for roasting them and squashing them and mincing them. They had to hear Bilbo's account of what had happened to him twice over before they were satisfied. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you. "Silly time to go practicing pinching and pocket picking," said Bumba, "when what we wanted was fire and food." "And that's just what you wouldn't have got. And that's just what you wouldn't have got of those fellows without a struggle in any case," said Gandalf. "Anyhow, you are wasting your time now. Don't you realize that the trolls must have a cave or a hole dug somewhere near to hide from the sun in? We must look into it." They searched about, and soon found the marks of trolls, stony boots going away through the trees. They followed the tracks up the hill until, hidden by bushes, they came on a big door of stone leading to a cave. But they could not open it, not though they all pushed while Gandalf tried various incantations. "Would this be any good?" asked Bilbo, when they were getting tired and angry. I found it on the ground where the trolls had their fight." He held out a largish key, though no doubt William had thought it was very small and secret. It must have fallen out of his pocket, very luckily, before it was turned to stone. "Why on earth didn't you mention it before?" they cried. Gandalf grabbed it and fitted it into the keyhole. Then the store door swung back with one big push, and they all went inside. There were bones on the floor, and a nasty smell was in the air, but there was a good deal of food jumbled carelessly on shelves and on the ground among an untidy litter of plunder of all sorts, from brass buttons to pots full of gold coins standing in a corner. There were lots of clothes, too, hanging on the walls, too small for trolls. I'm afraid they belonged to victims, and among them were several swords of various makes, shapes, and sizes. Two caught their eyes particularly because of their beautiful scabbards and jeweled hilts. Gandalf and Thorin each took one of these, and Bilbo took a knife in a leather sheath. It would have made only a tiny pocket knife for a troll, but it was as good as a short sword for a hobbit. "These look like good blades," said the wizard, half drawing them and looking at them curiously. "They were not made by any troll, nor by any smith among men in these parts and days. But when we can read the runes on them, we shall know more about them." "Let's get out of this horrible smell," said Philly. So they carried out the pots of coins, and such food as wasn't touched and looked fit to eat. Also one barrel of ale, which was still full. By that time, they felt like breakfast, and being very hungry, they did not turn their noses up at what they had got from the troll's larder. Their own provisions were very scanty. Now they had bread and cheese and plenty of ale and bacon to toast in the embers of fire. After that they slept, for their night had been disturbed, and they did nothing more till the afternoon. Then they brought up their ponies and carried away the pots of gold and buried them very secretly, not far from the track by the river, putting a great many spells over them just in case they ever had the chance to come back and recover. When that was done, they all mounted once more and jogged along again on the path towards the east. "Where did you go to, if I may ask?" said Thorin to Gandalf as they rode along. "To look ahead," said he. "And what brought you back in the nick of time?" "Looking behind." "Exactly," said Thorin. "But could you be more plain?" "I went on to spy out our road. It will soon become dangerous and difficult. Also, I was anxious about replenishing our small stock of provisions. I had not gone very far, however, when I met a couple of friends of mine from Rivendell." "Where's that?" asked Bilbo. "Don't interrupt," said Gandalf. "You will get there in a few days now, if we're lucky, and find out all about it. As I was saying, I met two of Elrond's people. They were hurrying along for fear of the trolls. It was they who told me that 3 of them had come down from the mountains and settled in the woods not far from the road. They had frightened everyone away from the district, and they waylaid strangers. I immediately had a feeling that I was wanted back. Looking behind, I saw a fire in the distance and made for it. So now you know. Please be more careful next time, or we shall never get anywhere." "Thank you," said Thorin. So that was just a few pages. I think it's nice, just a couple pages here and there. They last quite a very long time as well. I'm sure if you read this by yourself, you would be blazing right through it. But when you're narrating and giving characters voices and bringing the book to life, it takes much longer. Which is also good for me because my throat tends to dry up after a minute. And thus Yes, we must hydrate.
Hydrate, 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 hydrate. Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate.
The Habit. Oh, the Habit. Have you guys ever tried the Habit burgers? They have the most amazing veggie burgers, by the way, which are much cheaper. No, they're a little bit more expensive, but they're gigantic compared to their regular beef burgers. They're quite delicious as well. It's very, very filling. Hi, Carl. Hi, Mike. Hi, Kronos.
Hi, musical theater fan. Alright, broken toilet seat.
Thank you guys so much for joining my Monday streams today. Typically, I'm going to be doing Monday streams, whether I schedule it or not. You can expect to see me here Monday evenings. And then this weekend, I guess it's Saturday because that's Halloween, we'll be streaming a scary VR game. And maybe Phasmophobia again. We'll see. But, yeah. It was very nice having you all.
Watch out for my next video.
It's going to be another personality again.
Because I don't think the other sides of Charlotte really shine. When all that's expected of her is a nice, light, bright being. But it's fun to exercise other types of personalities. So we will do that. It is Halloween after all. Thank you guys. Good night.
See you in my next video.